Sorry, I didn't have a more, I didn't plan that out. I gotta plan that out for next time. I get opening. Welcome, everybody. Do we, I didn't hear you. Do we have any, public participants today?
I think we'll come in at the end.
We don't have it.
Oh, we have no audience, okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, I guess we'll get started. On the agenda today, let me pull it up electronically.
Yeah.
'Cause we're going to start out with minutes approval from from February's meeting. Actually, excuse me. I have everything in line today. I'm going to start out with line acknowledgement, as is our custom. Since time immemorial, the Kalapuya people have been the indigenous stewards to our region, building dynamic communities, maintaining balance with wildlife, and enacting sustainable land practices. This land acknowledgement is a way of resisting the erasure of indigenous histories and to honor Native communities by inviting truth and reconciliation. Following treaties between 1851 and 1855, Kalapuya people were dispossessed of their indigenous homeland by the United States government and forcibly moved to the Coast Reservation in Western Oregon. As we consider the impacts of colonization, we also acknowledge the strength and resiliency of displaced indigenous people. The city of Eugene is built within the traditional homelands known as Kalapuya Lihi. Kalapuya descendants are citizens of the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde Community of Oregon and the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians of Oregon. They continue to make contributions in our communities here and across the lands. We expressed our respect for the inherent political sovereignty of all federally recognized tribal nations and indigenous people who live in the state of Oregon and across the nation.
Yeah, that's
Great. Are there, did you all get a chance to review the minutes from the February meeting? And are there changes that need to be made to this record?
I have no changes, and Clay also has no changes, he emailed.
Oh, yeah.
So I will move to approve the minutes as
I'll second that.
minuted.
Thank you. Approved.
All in favor?
Oh, sorry, all in favor?
Aye.
You're abstaining.
All right, comments from board members and commission liaisons. Do we have any, Alan? We can start clockwise.
Alan, we'll start with, great sadness reporting the sudden death last week of the chair of the police commission, Dallas Boggs. That was a real shocker, and a real loss to the community that we're still processing. And there's a meeting on Thursday night, and some of that will be devoted to thinking and talking about Dallas. But a real, just a real pleasure of a chair to work with, someone to model the work of the chair for the city, and a real loss just on a lot of levels. So that happened. And then I sat here last month having confused the second and third Thursdays, and then reported that there is some smoldering issue that has now risen to the surface with EPD and in particular the treatment of women police officers and how that's going. And since I reported to you, Jody Unruh on KVAL did a story, and the Springfield officer had sent a letter to the police commission. And so I'm sure that will be a topic. In fact, there was some disclosure in the public realm of that there probably is a discipline matter that maybe not finished. That's why we haven't seen it, but I would anticipate this will rise to the level of something that the community wants to get to a greater understanding of what's going on and try to fix it if indeed there's something to be fixed. So that's those two things are pretty huge, and that's the police commission. And yeah, just remember, like every day, take treasure each day, because you never know. So, all right, that's my report. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great reminder. Thank you, Ellen. Monique?
Yeah, I also was devastated when I had seen the news about Dallas. I've heard of how great of a leader he was on that commission, so I know that that's a great loss. I also wanted to talk about, Officer Mozan. He came to one of my classes and did a presentation. I thought he did a really good job. He talked about, a wide range of topics, but he talked about the community court, he talked about the hoops and the new changes that are happening. So that was meaningful, and I believe he's retiring, so that'll be, something. The final thing that I wanted to talk about was, last week on Wednesday, I went to an event where Angela Davis was speaking. And aside from it being poorly run by the staff, there was an issue with policing. First, the person guarding the door was the U of O chief of police, which is like, I don't know, that seems like overkill. And then while there was just a crowd concern, there wasn't any violence, there was nothing going on. They called UOPD to come to the event. And once that happened, I was a little upset. They also were telling us that we were at risk of being arrested or trespassed. And I wasn't saying anything the entire time until that moment. And I went up to one of the adults that were saying that and asking what I was at risk for. Like, what was I doing that was putting me at risk? And she had said, the police do whatever they want. You have to know that. And I had said, I don't think it works like that. That's not okay. And she told me that the EMU director was over there. So I went over to him and I told him the exact same thing I told her. And he had said that we weren't at risk of being arrested. And then he made an announcement to the rest of the crowd. And then they actually sent all of the officers that came away. So I think that is just a demonstration. I know we don't have any oversight of UOPD. It'd be cool if we did. But that was just a demonstration of bad policing, bad optics, and it was poorly thought out. The idea, what did they think was going to happen?
I
Yeah.
don't know.
Oh,
Anyway.
what was the event? I'm sorry.
Angela Davis came to the U of O.
Oh.
And it was a disaster. She was amazing. Eventually got to see her after 2 hours of meeting, but it was great.
And how long did they know that she was coming? It was a week sort of thing?
I only knew the day before, so I don't know how long they,
New and plain.
right. And it was way over capacity. They had us in a room that was only 300 people, that could only fit 300 people, and there were at least 1,000 waiting. So they couldn't put us in,
Which room?
it was Straub, the biggest room in Straub, which only holds
For
300
Angela
people.
Davis?
Yeah, and they put Ta-Nehisi Coates in Matthew Knight Arena.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it would have made more sense. She's an icon. It would have made more
Yeah.
sense to put her there, but they didn't. And that would have been fine. It was the fact that they were threatening arrest. That in and of itself is somewhat traumatizing and scary. For a second, I was like, what does that mean? So yeah, just an example of bad policing. And I think it would be helpful to have some kind of training on crowd control and protest management and things like that.
Yeah, no, that could be, especially for folks who are here for the 2020 community impact case review. I think it would be interesting. We've actually talked about doing that before. Interesting to see sort of how things have evolved and because of lessons learned during the 2020 protest. So yeah, that's great. Sorry, I'm not supposed to talk right now.
Well, and I
No,
know,
you
well, and I know when they started the U of O PD, they talked about the civilian oversight and the challenge of having oversight on a college campus because of the turnover of students and the learning curve to kind of understand the whole process. And, there were a lot of reasons and because they're not our department, maybe Jean's department, that we can't do oversight of them, although sometimes we see them involved when our officers go out there. But it's not to say that they shouldn't have some oversight at all. And other than, I would think the board of trustees or regents or somebody that works there should know that process.
Do you know?
There is oversight. It's loose and not transparent. Right? Is that,
Oh, I don't.
you can't say anything.
Yeah.
There is, yeah, I was gonna look it up.
They have a complaint form and process and
There we go.
professional standards thing.
Please,
So-
yeah,
There is a mechanism for lodging a complaint.
um,
If I would have been-
the board is like appointed, as far as I can tell.
And it seems like something they can do because we have like the Oregon Constitutional Court and all of these other boards and commissions that people sit on. And then they leave. Like you have them for as long as you're a student. That's fine.
Sure, and like, we have term limits here also. Yeah, on the police.uoregon.edu, there's a complaints tab that you can look into. I have recommended student journalists who ask about this board, look into that. I feel like that's maybe more pertinent to like the Emerald or whatever. And I think there's more to discover if you look into that. That would be meaningful to students. Yeah. I don't have any comments other than that response. I don't know Dallas, I don't know of Dallas, but I'm sorry that that's something that you were affected by in the loss for the community. Yeah, that's all. That's all.
Bernadette?
Oh, no,
Oh, I'm sorry, didn't you have your comment?
no, I was just asking a question, but no.
Oh,
I
God,
don't have-
sorry.
It's all good. I don't have any comments.
Rick?
I have no comments. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I don't need any more comment. I'm good.
Okay, yeah, just making space. I also want to share in the mourning of Dallas's death. Yeah, a loss to this community. And I didn't know if this was right now or when we make comments for the case, but with regard to case, I want to acknowledge the distress involved in watching the video. That was a really distressing video. And not as a judgment or an editorializing kind of thing. I think on a human level, it just sucks seeing children involved in that way. And glad that we have oversight to make space to consider that. Yeah. Okay, so today we have a training topic on auditor updates and ongoing projects.
No.
Take it away, Leah.
Well, this is gonna be a bit meandering because there's a lot to cover, but number one is, yes, last week was hearing about Dallas was very shocking and surprising and just yeah, I've been doing a fair amount of work with the commission lately and he was always wonderful, gracious, and so it's a loss. And so I acknowledge that. And then also, Jose, I really appreciate you pointing that out about the video, and I'm sure we'll talk about it again in the case review, but just that's something that I learned about secondary trauma from this job. And and I think I have a lot of gratitude for Lindsay and Rob for a lot of things, but one of them is how many videos that they watch and filter for me. I had to watch some dog bite videos last week and I was like, God, it's been a while. So no, I'm just it's tough to watch all these uses of force, right? Like obviously it's tough to be a part of that. All of it is tough. And I think it's also hard when we're asking for videos on complaints and uses of force and all these things. And so we see a lot of negative interactions, right? And sometimes we see positive ones as well. So it's nice to balance out, but it's a tough job. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Can I add, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. I wrote down a script and I didn't even read it. I wanted to add that the care involved with the police auditor's office with regard to human subjects. Respect and appreciate the work that you all do and know that that's a valuable like public service and public good that doesn't really, I don't think, get acknowledged or has a space to be acknowledged. So on the record, yeah. And
Thank you.
anyway,
No, thank you.
certainly not.
I love these meetings. So ongoing projects, we just sort of have a few, we're in the beginning, we're in the first quarter of the year, we're working on our annual report. We have a few sort of long-term projects that we've been working on and or have started, and wanted to give a couple of updates to make sure that you all are on top of what we're working on, right? So one is related to what you were mentioning with their.
Can we stop? I keep hearing a phone ring.
I do
Legal
too.
and somebody's outside calling.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No, thank you. I went, last meeting I heard that too and I was confused. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. I help.
Happens all
I
the
think
time,
that-
so we're desensitized, but yes.
Okay.
The first time you hear, you are like, oh.
So yes, so the issue of women at EPD was raised at police commission. We did do a related investigation over the last half of last year. It is in your closed cases. So you can follow whatever process you all choose to follow with that. And then sort of related to that, we've been sort of getting, in the face of anecdotes and stories, what I like to work with instead is data. So we've asked for demographic data from our city partners in the Employee Resource Center and at EPD, and they've all graciously agreed to work with us to get us information around gender, race, ethnicity of employees at EPD to the extent that whatever that is possible. Lindsay did an amazing proposal with just like, this is what we want. These are the data points that we're looking for and sort of what we want to compare over this time period, right? Because I think there have been various studies over the years and nothing since 2017. But it's time to kind of look and see what we're dealing with. And then hopefully whatever story the data tells us, not hopefully, but whatever story the data tells us, then we can make actually informed policy recommendations. And whatever comes out of that, we can address in an informed, knowledgeable way instead of just sort of playing whack-a-mole with anecdotes, right? Which is what we try to not do. So that's one of the projects that we're working on. I don't have a specific timeline for that. I would hope that we could get that maybe within 6 months. Okay, but I will be talking to Police Commission on Thursday about sort of our role and what we do with the face of a complaint, sort of like the email that we got, what we would do with that, and also sort of letting them know more about, we are really engineered. Our main focus is to look at specific instances of allegations of misconduct. And we also are allowed to report on policing trends, report on disciplinary trends, report on various trends, and make policy recommendations. And so that we're working on that as well. So that is one. I don't know if this is going to take. But the other issue of concern, which I think I've raised here before, but vehicle pursuits last year jumped way up. We used to, we had an average of like 4 over the previous several years.
10 years.
10 years. And that was one of sort of Mark's pet issues. For those of you who worked with Mark, he really was concerned about vehicle pursuits and the liabilities involved for the community as a whole, as well as the police involved. And so the policy was really ramped down to a pretty strict application of vehicle pursuits. And then they stayed pretty low for several years. And then last year there were 18. And so that was difficult, honestly, on a logistical level to get reviews of all of those. There was understandably the employee who was doing the pursuit reviews at EPD was probably not prepared for 18 either. I'm gonna make an assumption there. So it was just, we had a real issue with how do we do this in a timely, informed way and not let any of them slip through the cracks. And so, yes.
Were any of those the same officers? Like, was there a pattern?
Oh, God, I don't know. I mean, yes, there were some similar officers involved. It's not like all 18 were one person.
Yeah.
That would be ways.
That'd be easy to figure out.
But so we were looking at, there was a policy change can we point to that? That wasn't really a fully explaining the increase, and meanwhile, they just kept coming, right? So independently, EPD has decided to do a different review process for those, and they're gonna look at those in patrol command. I think that's fantastic, but then I also worked with Cindy and remembered that we used to look at them in our weekly or now bi-weekly IA meetings together, and that's super helpful for us because we can get that perspective of the IA folks in the room, the EPD command staff folks in the room, and really understand, does this look like a troubling pursuit that should be elevated to an allegation of misconduct? Does this look like maybe a pursuit that's outside of policy but isn't that level? Or is this a pursuit at all, honestly? Because there's a few things that get in our nerves that don't turn out to be pursuits. So we are gonna work with EPD and start that review process back up in our IA meetings, our regular meetings. And so I'm really looking forward to that because I think it's, I mean, A, it's just informative and helpful to look at those together, but B, it's good for communication, relationship building, and all the things that we do with you guys. Yes, okay.
Are you at the level in your analysis where you are seeing trends yet?
As far as, I mean, I would say the trend that we've been able to sort of see is it tends to be younger officers.
Officers with less than 5 years
5
of
years
experience,
experience.
so I don't age
That's fair.
irrespective
That's
of
more
age.
specific,
Less
Yeah,
than 5 years
Uh,
on our force or in.
I haven't dug down to see if that translates to laterals as well. So I can't, I don't know, would be my answer to you. It's a good question.
Yeah.
Time of day, but that's true over the 10-year period of time. There are certain times of day when pursuits are much more likely to happen. That may also sort of be conflated with the officers of less than 5 years of experience because they would tend to work the shifts that you would tend to see the pursuits. There's a lot more pursuits at night than during the
Yeah.
day. There was a policy change, so some of them, when you look at the so EPD keeps great data. This is like a really good thing for us. The reason for pursuit is something that is captured. And so when you look at the reason for pursuit, there are a good handful that you can say, before this wouldn't have been in policy, now it is allowable, it's explicitly allowable, it explains some of it. So there's a lot of kind of different things, like aside from whether these pursuits were inside or outside of policy, just sort of like, what are the different things that we can look at that seem to be single or a small number of really outlying officers driving the numbers does not appear to be a significant factor. That was kind of one of the first things that I checked. There are officers who have engaged in more pursuits, but I think it was something, I don't want to give you an exact number.
Sure.
But if you look at the department as a whole, officers on the whole engaged in less than one pursuit a year. Of the officers that did engage in pursuits, most of them only engaged in one over, I think I was looking at like an 18-month period, maybe a two-year period. So that wasn't particularly explanatory. It wasn't like one person got in 10 pursuits. There were a couple officers who got in a couple pursuits, but it was kind of spread.
Yeah.
It's a good question.
Do you want, sorry, one more question.
Yeah.
Do you have comparator data sets like from other agencies or?
I did not, I mean, I did not look at that. I would say one of the challenges is that policies from agency to agency are so vague
Sure, yeah.
that I don't, I mean, we would need to find an agency with essentially a very restrictive
That's it,
pursuit policy.
Yeah, okay.
So I haven't gone around to see if there are others that would be logical to compare to. And then there are kind of like a lot of other things that would be involved, like, I don't know, population size, is it urban, is it rural? Like there's this, so it's such a high context thing. I only looked at comparing ourselves to ourselves, basically, for the 10-year period. So the 10-year period captures the first policy change where we had about 20 pursuits a year, and then it plummets to 2, 3, 4, you know, for like 8 years, and then you see a up.
What about like 2020, 21, 22, and 20?
They were roughly the same as the years that preceded them. You didn't see anything particularly interesting about the lockdown years.
And I should say, obviously, Lindsay is my data person.
Clearly.
And we will be including this work with the annual report. And again, it's one of those, once we have a better picture with the data and we can cut things off from, like, so we have a year of data, then we can.
Anything from the defendant's perspective, like why they're running?
Jeremy?
Why?
Yeah, that was what I was thinking.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. We do capture, well, we don't capture information from their perspective. We capture information like what was the initial violation that the officer observed, or what was the reason for initiating, which can be slight variations on a theme,
Are
right?
people willing to run for less important things that in the past, maybe, they didn't? So,
The only-
Or race after.
Sure,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
fear. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
fear.
I didn't significantly look at those types of factors.
Come on.
I know. But they're good questions. I like them. I'm curious. Now I'm gonna go back.
Well, and hopefully we can, again, get to a place where we can make informed, is this a training issue, is this a policy issue, what may help, and I wanna stress also, we're not doing a question of like. Pursue and catch the person versus pursue, and don't pursue and let them go, it's pursue and catch the person, usually with some kind of vehicle accident. Or catch them a different way, right? Like I'm not advocating for just letting folks go. And I think one other way that, well, looking to see if we can capture the data around the costs, right? Of the damage to the EPD vehicles, damage to citizen vehicles, damage to human bodies,
Property.
medical stuff, all the above. So, yeah, so that's another deep well that became deeper than we expected. And every time last year I was like, we're gonna do a pursuit report, we would just get more pursuits. So, I'm looking forward to be able to report out on that. And then annual report, we are set to present the annual report, May 8th at council. So we will also have CRB's annual report at council, and we will have those finished before then.
That's right.
We'll check in with y'all.
What
And
time will that be on the 8th? Do we know yet?
I don't know,
It's, what, the 8th of,
May, sorry. Yeah, I will let you know, but I'm not sure actually off the top of my head. I don't know if we're first or second on the agenda.
Is it the noon meeting then? Or you don't know?
Just gonna put it all day for,
There we go.
Yeah, all day long.
Yeah.
It was doing last year.
Yeah, I suspect it will be, I'm not sure. But I will keep you posted. And that is actually, I think that's all my ongoing projects, right? Yeah, no, questions.
I do, I have a question. So first, I haven't heard about this issue, with potentially women at EPD. The only thing I've literally heard is what Alan said and what you said, so kind of like some bit of enlightenment.
So, basically, so a couple months ago, time is hard, but a couple months ago, Police Commission had a presentation about DEI in recruitment and retention at EPD. During that conversation, there was some question about folks leaving EPD for neighboring agencies. And how many people had, and it was a question. And then I think, and then the presenter answered, I think, using a different historical frame. Previously, there were some EPD employees who went to Springfield and had since separated from Springfield. But that wasn't actually an accurate answer to the question that had been asked that meeting. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yes, the EPD officer that was there testifying, presenting information, misspoke and
Yeah.
there was follow-up at one Springfield officer then wrote the police commission
Yeah.
following that and pointed out what was inaccurate
Yeah.
about what was said.
And so, yeah, so and she had been at EPD and left for Springfield and had watched the meeting and so wrote a note to police commission explaining that was incorrect. In my experience, this is why people are leaving, alleged toxic work environment. And a few other more specific things. I can get you that doc. I mean, it's a public document. And then in the follow-up, so Chief Skinner spoke to it more at last month's meeting around sort of the efforts that he's made to, around women in the department, representation of the department. There was some data in that.
Yes, specifically, I asked 2 meetings ago, like, I knew the answer. There are no women on SWATs. I didn't know the answer, but I think there are no women in K-9. I did not know the answer, but I think there are no women in drones. Like, there seems to be an issue of special units and lack of participation, and I don't even know about minority and other, like, you know, so I just think it's a scratch,
Yeah.
I really appreciate what the auditor said about data driving this discussion and not anecdotes, and I don't want to be judging or anything, I'm just, this is a recital to you, in response to what the issue that is surfacing. Yeah, I think there'll be more, you know, the police commission has a work plan and limited flexibility and things surface and have to fit into places, but that's why I'm trying to go on there. Didn't.
Well, and I think it's one of those where it raised a lot of concerns from the police commission, and partially at least because they got this email and they didn't know what was being done about it, right? And so I'm there at police commission, but I'm there to answer questions. It's not really my place to jump in and be like, oh, I've looked at this, right? And so, but I guess that's what I'm doing on Thursday. So yeah, my hope is if I go and I explain, like, this is our investigative process, we look at specific allegations of misconduct. Cultural complaints are not in our wheelhouse, but what we can do is report on trends. What we can do is make informed recommendations, and that's what we're focused on, right? And I sent them an email kind of explaining that, and so I'm really just going to sort of reiterate that, answer any questions they have. And hopefully get to a point. And I will say, like, so Alan, I think it was you who requested the data on who's on gender makeup of special teams, and so that data was provided in the last police commission report. And it's true, there's low representation on some teams, there's higher representation on other teams. But I think one of the things that came out of that is Chief spoke to trying to get more equitable special team selection, right? So already I think we're moving in a good direction. And you know, this is not a problem specific to EPD, right?
I'm
Like,
sure,
women
yeah.
in policing is a national, like international, right, problem. So I actually sent some policy recommendations. There's a national report on women in leadership and policing, and I sent that to police commission, like, hey, here's something to sort of chew on, right? Like, this could be where we end up going, or here's some ideas, right? So I think this is one of those areas where it looks like there could be work to be done. We want to make sure that we're doing some good targeted work, and it's also not a EPD specific problem, if that helps.
Yes, that was very helpful. The last thing I want to say, and it's like just maybe food for thought, I certainly am not a data expert at all, but like what comes to mind is maybe that one officer, that was anecdotal, but if we spoke to every woman at the department and it ends up being a trend between them all, and that might be like important qualitative data.
Right, we've talked about the qualitative versus quantitative issue. I think it's difficult, right? I think historically the qualitative data, whenever there has been a qualitative data analysis at EPD, it's been done by an outside, not us.
This could be a consultant too. I've been sitting here holding my tongue, but who knows
Yeah,
where this
exactly.
goes? It could
Yeah.
not fall on the auditor to
Right.
investigate. If there is something to be investigated, doesn't mean it has to be the auditor.
And again,
And
sorry.
that was gonna be my question. It's like, has anything been raised that should have opened a case? That has opened a case or should have opened a case?
There was
Is it closed?
there was a related case that's in your closed packet. It's not.
Well, what would because this sounds like a structural problem, not any individual people. So what would a complaint be about?
You have to look at your closed case packet.
I'm going to email the chair after the meeting and ask that closed case, because that's our process for getting cases in front of the board. I'm going to ask that closed case that we're discussing be a CRB agenda discussion case, so that way,
And it had closed before, it's not. and
or at
also-
least get the fact, even if you don't want to do if they don't want to do a full treatment of it, they could at least get the facts of it out.
No, no problem. And I will say, anecdotally, this is one of those, this was definitely one woman's experience. I know we've interviewed, well, hold on. I'm trying to not get too into specifics here, but I know this is one woman's experience. I know it's also not everyone's experience, and I'm not discounting any of those experiences. If that makes sense. Like that's one reason why I want to go with data and not dive into qualitative work right now. Potentially that would be down the road, but also potentially that would be better suited for, honestly, frankly, the auditor coming in and being like, tell me about your experience at work. A lot of people aren't going to want to talk to us. That's fine, right? I get that. So potentially outside folks could have way more accurate work product than we will. So, but when we look at the data, I think that we can do accurately and helpfully and get to a better direction. So I thought you had a comment.
Check in with Rick every once in a
I did not know I was reading my words at the bottom of that. Oh,
Well, it's kind of reading your words, so check in with breakfast.
I'm gonna ignore that. Okay, so yes, so that is sort of ongoing. Does anyone else have questions? Comments, statements? What else do you do all day? Anything like that?
I don't think, from what I've heard so far, it does not sound like something that the auditor should be getting stuck in the middle of. Which is kind of what it's sounding like. It's like if this was something that was brought to the police commission, that's a cultural thing. I don't think going back to what the bylaws say the auditor is supposed to do and what the CRB is supposed to review. It's not to discount any allegations or any concerns that are going on there, but I think it's way beyond what we should be doing because it,
Right.
it's sounding personnel-ish, HR
Absolutely.
sort of thing. And
Yeah.
so I think any pressure that might be coming on you in your office to be stepping into the middle of this, I think that would not be an okay thing to do.
Yeah.
I don't know how you gracefully back out of pressure that might be put on you to do that, but I personally don't think
Yeah.
that's.
No.
At the same time, we reviewed the burrito
Mhm,
personnel issue. I don't know how else to say it.
mhm.
The issue of misconduct
Yeah.
with the supervisor rubbing the burrito
With
in the
the
genitals.
unsafe work environment.
No, I will say, I think.
It's
they're
a
actually-
good, interesting, I'm not discounting it.
No,
It's
I think
interesting,
these are
yeah.
both really good points and they're actually, I think they are the same
They're
thing,
salient,
right?
yeah.
Because that's exactly it, Bernadette. I think I'm trying to be really conscious of staying in my lane of specific instances of misconduct, right? Investigating those, closing out those cases, bringing them to you where you guys want to look at them, right? Which is happening. And then also looking at my reporting on trends and making policy recommendations, which is still my lane, but not getting into any kind of cultural issues, right? That's not what our office does. That's not what this group does. That is the chief's department and police commission can influence policy. And I'm trying to be clear whenever I talk about this, about which lane I'm in and hopefully help people with which lane they're in as well.
Thank you.
Because failure to drive in single lanes and fresh.
Exactly, yeah. All these lanes and directions and all these, yeah, a lot of driving.
Class D traffic.
Does anyone check? frequency? Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Bernadette. Rick, do you have any thoughts on this map?
I agree with Bernadette. I think that we need to be conscious about our role, the police commission's role, the chief's role, the HR department's role. Those are all different lanes and we need to stay out of theirs. And to the extent it becomes a misconduct issue, then I think we need to investigate it and do what we do. But other than that, I don't think it's necessary for us to spend a lot of time on it at this point. I'm not belittling the fact that my daughter would like to have just as big a break as anybody else, and not be harassed on the job. But unless it arises to a breach of policy, then I don't think we should be involved in it.
No, thank you, Rick, and I appreciate it. Also, I will just say I'm getting flashbacks to COVID, seeing you and your background.
Yeah.
Again, spent a lot of time watching you.
Looking at all the family pictures.
Yes. Sorry.
My daughter hates one of those photos, I have to tell you already, but
I'm sure your chair is in front of it. You can't even see it.
Totally. But no, I think that's really, I appreciate those comments a lot, and I'm trying to be very mindful about not overstepping and definitely staying in what I am directed and authorized and supposed to be doing. So I will try to do the same for you as well. But I did want you to know what I'm doing, because you're overseeing. You may be contacted.
It is our job.
We do pay you.
That is on our purview.
It's you, Bernadette.
We the people.
Okay, well, I think then that is it, and I'm happy to be somewhat before. Him.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Next item on our agenda is to break for a few minutes. So let's do that and reconvene in.
We're hot.
We will start our case review out with a presentation from Lindsay and Rob.
Are the doors unlocked? Like,
Are we missing someone?
They said-
You're arriving.
Oh, thank you.
I'll double check.
He should be here by the 6:15 break is what he said.
I just remembered, I think the downstairs doors might close at 6. So
I was there, it's open.
Okay.
I got locked. I found a new staircase that I've never seen before.
Exciting.
Maybe it just came in. Sorry, we're live, I forgot.
Yeah, we're recording.
Thanks for the hint.
All right, so we have one case for tonight. And our case review is a allegation of failed body worn video deployment. So the summary of facts, on August 17th, 2023, Eugene PD officers were dispatched with shoplifting, which is a F3 service call. Officer A and Officer B responded to the incident. Officer B contacted one of the involved parties, the suspect, of the shoplifting. Officer B gave lawful commands to detain the suspect, that he or she, the suspect, did not comply with the directions. During the contact with Officer B, the suspect had control of a child stroller which held 2 children. Officer B used force to overcome the suspect's resistance and arrested him and her. During the use of force review of the event by members of the auditor's office, it was revealed that Officer A and Officer B did not deploy the body-worn video recording instruments during the use of force arrest. An internal affairs investigation regarding the body-worn video deployment was initiated and allegations drafted. So in his or her interview, Officer A acknowledged that he or she had been occasionally deficient with body-worn video activation. Officer A stated that his or her primary focus was safely handling incidents. And Officer A stated that the failed body-worn video activation was unintentional and accidental. In his or her IA interview, Officer B stated that he or she was shocked and upset when he or she learned that his or her body-worn video system failed to capture the event. Officer B stated his or her primary focus was handling the situation suspect safely. Officer B stated the failed body-worn video activation was unintentional and accidental. So the allegations for Officer A, that on August 17th, Officer A failed to use his or her body-worn video system when he or she was about to make contact with a person who he or she had reasonable suspicion had committed a crime. And then for Officer B, that on August 17th, 2023, Officer B failed to use his or her body-worn video system when he or she was about to make contact with a person who he or she had reasonable suspicion had committed a crime and who he or she subsequently arrested and took into custody. And so here are the employees and the adjudication recommendations. So the chain of command from the sergeant up to the deputy chief for Officer A aren't included because Officer A left Eugene Police Department. So the auditor's recommendation was made. Chief of Police made his final recommendation, but there isn't a middle ground because of the change in employment. And then Officer B, so the auditor's office recommended insufficient evidence. Sergeant, lieutenant, captain were within policy. Deputy chief sustained, and then the chief adjudicated it as insufficient evidence. So then here are the issues for y'all to discuss, same as normal. Has relevant policies in there, the 1203 for the body worn video.
A slide that talks about the difference between the insufficient.
It was in your packet. I
Right,
don't,
yeah, I
I
just didn't know
don't
if we-
have it that I can pull it up.
Okay, that's fine. No, I knew, I saw it in the packet. I just didn't print that sheet off, so.
Yeah, I'm a
wanna see it?
little reluctant sharing the screen to dig through my documents.
Yeah,
That's okay.
Because you never know what you might pull up.
Yeah, no, that's good.
All right. First round of discussion is for general comments. Would you please start us off, Bernadette?
Sure. Don't have a lot other than, I mean, I was surprised that we were taking another body worn camera case after last month. And I think it was how it was so completely different that last month it was, I didn't turn it on. Yep, sorry, bad me. Just completely, admitted that there was a failure to do what they're required to do. And this one, it was, there wasn't that same level. When it's a shall as opposed to should, that's a big distinction for me. And so I think one of the officers thought that this was rather nitpicky, I guess is probably the best way to put it. I took issue with that, because I don't think anything that we do that we're looking into is nitpicking. I think it's, you either did or you didn't do it, and then it's up for the chief to decide, how much of a sanction, I guess, should happen. So I just thought it was interesting that we were doing two back to back, and just how the answers were so different. So that's all.
Thank you. Rick?
I don't have any general comments. I have some comments for later, but I'll withhold those.
Thank you.
It's my turn.
Yeah.
I agree with Rick. I'll say that later.
I think general comments kind of address case selection. In that, yeah, we've been reviewing some body worn video complaints, and is providing an opportunity for us to talk about where the failure is happening in ways that is more capacious than about individual officers' responsibility to do that, and also why there isn't maybe some more like habit-based kinds of things that you see came out in some of the officers' responses in the interview. So thanks for noticing that.
So complaint intake classification, that's kind of general comments first. Oh, we've added around. Okay. Well, my general comment was also a reaction. It's kind of intake, but to the video, which was really like, usually I don't have a hard time, and I had a really, really hard time with these clips, and I was kind of surprised. But in the intake, so there was an automatic review because of the use of force, and these complaints were generated out of, that's what came out of it. What was instructed to me, and really has nothing to do with what we're doing today, but what a split-second decision that's what the auditor and the internal review team and everyone, they had to look at that moment to decide, like, is this something else or just the fact that they didn't turn the body cam on? And so it was just the repercussions of that 1 second were huge. And apparently, I'm not judging. Apparently, it was copacetic. It was not seen to be within policy and the decision. I'm not second guessing this thinking of that officer. It's just amazing how, you know, the total, all those things coming together in a confluence and a split second decision, and then just I never really have to get up and like walk away from it, but I did this time because it was tough. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I definitely get, you know, the like feeling like they're being nitpicked at, especially like in this case, we're talking about seconds and decision making. But ultimately, I think body worn cameras in particular, that policy is important. So I think having a high standard for that makes it so that perhaps they won't forget, or that it will be more routine. Yeah, so that's what I have.
Yeah, in terms of general comments, I would just say, like, I think I'm cluing into what you were saying, Jose, and that we're sort of seeing multiple sides of an issue and have an opportunity to provide our feedback on that particular issue, and we're seeing hiccups in the system or something like that. So I'll be interested to talk about that in later down the line.
Thanks, Glenn. All right, Rick, would you please get us started out on a round of discussion for complaint intake, classification, and monitoring?
I think it was legitimate intake. It was obvious that would have been helpful to have body worn camera from both officers. Fortunately, there was a video camera person on the scene and took some pretty graphic pictures of what happened, and so we don't have to worry about that. And I don't think there was any question about the choice of the officer at the time. I think if anything, it appeared to me that the officer was looking out for the child. Number one, got the child away from the perpetrator or alleged perpetrator. I think the classification was good, and that's it.
Thank you, Rick.
Okay, I have questions. I always have questions. Bernadette was talking about this a little bit, but why did these officers, I mean, it sounded in the interviews like they said, yeah, I didn't turn it on, right? So why didn't that become a stipulation? That's a new word I know from last month. Why didn't they stipulate and
Yeah,
just move on? Do they have a choice to either like
yeah.
fight it or?
So that, I mean, yes, I think I mentioned last, like, especially in cases sort of like this, where it feels fairly cut and dry, that the expedited thing is offered.
Mhm.
It was offered, it was not, taken up on. My sense was, you know, there was so much going on, it happened so fast, we didn't have a chance to do it, and my response to that was, oh, yes, there's always a lot going on, and also it was sort of twofold, right? It's one, body worn video, in my understanding, is extremely important to this community, especially, I mean, given that force was used, obviously they don't know that when they get out of the car, and also it's really important. That's why it's a shall, right, in the policy. And two, that I don't have any other avenue to ask questions of officers, like, hey, tell me more about what was going on, other than this process, right? Like, so it was kind of this place where I was like, look, that's interest, I hear your feedback. And the only way that we can have that conversation about all of the things going on that made it hard to remember to turn this on is by doing this process. So hopefully
Okay.
that helps.
So are all officers, when they have an allegation, are they given the opportunity to admit?
All officers, all allegations? No.
Okay,
If it's, I would say body worn is sort of on a tier of, usually it's just simpler. It's like, is there video? No. Should there have been? Yes.
Right.
But things like use of force, things like constitutional rights, like it's hardly ever any kind of cut and dry. And most of the time they do want to talk about their decision-making process, right? Because usually there's like a, hey, this is why I did that thing that. And I do think, I think we kind of we're at a point with some folks where the scrutiny is the punishment, right? And that's unfortunate because that makes it so that whatever corrective action isn't the punishment, right? It's the scrutiny, is that we looked at them and said we had this conversation, and that's really sad. When that happens, I think, because I mean, that's why I'm here, right? That's my job and I'm not gonna go away. So I try to avoid that and rebuild when that's happening.
Yeah.
And I sense it, obviously here.
Right, definitely so as well. With Officer B,
Okay,
B, A.
Both.
the one who resigned.
It's the one who resigned, yeah,
Yeah.
like they definitely had a lot to say about that. Okay, and then another question, they also talk a lot about how theft 3 doesn't usually.
Sorry,
No,
is that right?
I don't know,
It's not.
that's not
Is that
right.
right?
That's not.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Theft 3, which is the tongue twister, apparently, they don't get called on. And that seemed to be kind of a sticking point with this case also, and also. I don't know. I don't know where this actually falls in the discussion. Maybe it should have been general, but, it seemed like a pretty strong reaction to something that was theft 3, which I understand is under $100 of merchandise or.
It was $42
I
of
think so.
balaclava.
I don't even know what,
Balaclavas.
Like a face cover.
face mask.
Oh,
like for,
Right.
For
Snowboarding.
circling.
Snowboarding, yeah.
I don't know what my question is, but it was just interesting how they, talked about that a lot,
Yeah,
that it was theft 3.
well, and yes, I found that interesting as well.
And it felt like a very, like the use of, like that also makes me feel like the use of force. Maybe should have been,
Lawyers to talk about the grandfathers.
thinking, why are you there?
Yeah.
That 3, it's not serious.
right, like, I mean, the force that was used wouldn't have been too much in another crime, alleged crime, in my mind. But it seemed like it was too much for $42 of stocking cap. But I know that, yeah, like that's not,
Well,
does that not matter?
We didn't make that an allegation, right?
Right,
And
right.
it was definitely, so when looking at the use of force, looking at all of the gram factors, and yes, the severity of the crime is one of them.
Mhm.
Basically, I mean, the consensus was that it didn't appear to be an excessive use of force because, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I did not review this case today. Takedown is a fairly low level of force. It is a low level of crime, but while the force used is visually, like when you're watching it, it's concerning, and there's, under all the circumstances, there's the kid present and all that stuff.
I feel it.
What?
I got feeling, I'm sure it
Yeah,
also does
it
not feel
feels,
great.
no, it does not feel good to get taken down. I'm making some assumptions there. I'm fine. But like, no, I think that's all the things. And so, but looking at it from the legal analysis, it didn't seem to be a policy violation. So we
Okay,
did
yeah.
not have that one on here.
Okay, and that totally makes sense, like I do understand the reasoning there, but it just makes me wonder, like the punishment doesn't fit the crime, the use of force didn't fit the crime.
Well, and I think that's where it kind of comes down to for me sometimes, like focus blows and takedowns are a low level of force, right? They are. When you're
Right,
looking
right.
at, looking at the legal analysis, they are low level of force. Do they feel that way?
No,
Exactly, yeah.
Potentially I'd be very traumatized.
Right,
for the rest of
I
life.
imagine I would not be psyched about it, although they might be, never just kidding. The auditor's down. But sorry.
Don't put that in the minute.
No, don't put that, I'm sorry. But no, I think, but so I think that's where it's like a cognitive dissonance, right? Where it's like, that's a low level of force. But if you're not someone who's doing this every day, it doesn't look low, right? And it probably doesn't feel low, but when you are trained in this and please speak to this, Jen. Moving in, but, that is actually a
Yeah,
low level of force. So when we're doing the analysis, is a low level of force. Is that, did I miss anything?
No, only other thing I would say is that there is sort of the initial use of force. the takedown, then there's the complication of the interaction with the person's behavior as it continues to escalate
Yeah.
once that initial force is used.
Sure.
Mhm,
And all of those things have to kind of be considered
mhm,
separately,
mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So it's a chain of events, and that's what makes it, this one in particular, for me, feel particularly difficult.
We definitely talked about and considered whether or not we needed to go somewhere with the use of force.
Did you think about judgment?
I think we talked about the escalation, and we talked about judgment, yeah, and I think ultimately, this felt most accurate.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine. I didn't know when to
You're doing great.
offer, so I apologize. Some of the factors that were taken into
Sorry,
account.
wait, this is Sergeant Jensen.
Hey.
He's working in IA. Come to the table so we can
Thank
see
you.
your face.
I'm nervous.
That's
Sorry.
okay. Don't be nervous.
Wait till ask questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, that wasn't even my hard question.
So I came by a couple months ago. I'm Sergeant Jensen. I'm John Jensen. I go by John. And anyway, some of the things that that one of the officers considered when making the approach and prior to contact was the several people that were in the area, the avenues of escape, and the fact that they were looking for two separate suspects, right? And so one of the suspects fled, the other one was walking, not obeying commands, and had the children there. And those were factors that the officer took into account, knowing that quickly detaining somebody is much easier than slowly fighting with somebody when there's other people around as well.
Thank
So,
you. I forgot
yeah,
about
does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm saying those are factors that came into decision-making. And those are factors that I've seen in decision-making. And I think something that really stuck out to me is everybody there. And I was happy to hear that it was thought about here too, is everyone was aware of the children and that the children were something to consider, some humans to consider about what was going on, what was seen and stuff like that. And so that was definitely on the officer's mind at the time. And then I do think about, if I was putting myself in that situation, I think about some crimes are considered more of a penalty because children are present, right? You have some of the assault crimes and things like that. And though this is a theft 3, this person did it intentionally in a place with children there and then continued to evade slowly, but evade the officers with the children there. And one would wonder that potentially that's a known crutch that the person could lean on. And I'm not.
Sure.
Yeah, and that's just a consideration I thought of when I was kind of reviewing it, because I was like, man, so glad I'm sitting behind a desk watching this on a computer and not having to make some of these decisions.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
is that helpful?
Yes.
Yeah.
thank
Okay,
you.
sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. I mean,
Yeah,
You guys are really nice, but I'm scared. I'm not.
Just you, Lee.
Yeah.
Testified in court.
Well, it's nice to have it reversed for a change.
Way easier in court.
Yeah, you guys are way easier in court.
Okay.
Have to look at our rearview mirror.
Oh, I get nervous when I get behind me too. My doors, I'm like, oh, Joel's gonna look at this one. Anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I want to make my comment or place my comment in the ongoing long-term, what I think should remain open discussion about force and policing. And I mean, I want to say, my reading, a subjective one of Officer B's report is page 3 of 13 on the IA report. I don't know what page this is on the PDF. There's a lot of them
Mhm.
this week. And thank you for the thorough investigation.
Thanks.
This is Officer B at the bottom of page 13. I told suspect to have a seat on the curb and they replied, no. I told them to have a seat on the curb once again, and they continued to say no and began to talk away from me, grabbed a hold, And, prior to that, says when they had seen me approaching, them, they began to walk towards me and attempted to walk away from me. And the time frame between when the officer B hailed the suspect and put hands on the suspect was 3 seconds, according to the video. So I'm not trying to play gotcha here. It's absolutely the case that phenomenologically someone could remember something differently than how video could be presenting to it. There's a discrepancy there. And I thought that, I think I had some similar observations that this happened really fast. Is this within the presence of a child, does that, in committing a crime like a theft, is that child endangerment? Does that qualify as that kind of crime?
I mean, I don't,
I mean, I don't think so.
It's not like having a minor child in a car when you get a DUI, which
Right.
would be an enhanced crime.
Yeah.
Like, I don't.
So this is
believe-
not a,
Don't believe so.
No.
I mean,
so we're in some kind of gray area-ish,
Yeah, well, and I think it's an interesting. point
judgment-ish
where-
that calls.
Well, yeah, and it's, yeah, a low level crime, but the way that it was conducted makes you.
It was
question
fast.
Whether they'd be a person.
Yeah, and I say that as someone who's not
Yeah.
has no experience as a police officer.
Mhm.
But in terms of like review and classification, I didn't have I didn't want to go against the auditors.
That's okay.
I just wanted to bring a question about escalation.
Yeah, no, we definitely, I remember talking about de-escalation. Sorry, for those of you who remember when Lindsay was on the board, we talked a lot about de-escalation.
Yeah.
And now it's been.
You should have a t-shirt made.
Yeah, no, but no, so I think that was definitely something we talked about, and I think it could have been part of this, and also I think de-escalation is a very, very tough one to be throwing at people, because lots of reasons.
And so is judgment.
So is judgment, and I think, I appreciate the feedback, right? And I
Yeah,
appreciate, because it helps me to hear what you all think about when you watch this, right? And that's why we have this, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, the video would seem to show the suspect not walking away
Okay.
or fleeing,
Mhm.
so.
But they talked about it. Sorry, if it's.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair.
I wonder, because I kind of thought the same thing when I read it and when I saw it, but I thought sometimes it's like you're looking this way, but you're walking that way, so it's
Sure,
like, I
yeah.
think sometimes it's those nuanced things that you're not gonna see on a video.
Sure.
It's like, and having had contact with people, it's like you're intuiting what others have done in similar situations. And, the direction that the stroller is going as to where you are. Go ahead, John.
No, I don't want to interrupt.
No, but I think, I kind of think, because I was like trying to look at that video, it's like, what was the likely path? And the likely path of the stroller was away from the officer, but kind of towards the officer, if that makes sense. So
Well, that's what they said.
right, so I
Walk
think that's,
toward me
when
and
you
away
say
from-
that there's a discrepancy between what they're writing and what you're seeing, that's how I was seeing it. It was just like, I could see that you could split hairs and say it's a discrepancy, but I don't think it was. I think it was.
Maybe it's,
I mean,
what my students would say is a kind of vibe that can't be captured necessarily in an interview, but a feeling that is part of the tools that I think goes into policing. Sure, yeah.
And thinking on a lot of what you were saying, let's say he stole a mask and he knows he stole a mask, and he sees two officers pull up and their cars are there, and one of them gets out to address them. What do you think, if you were a reasonable person, what do you think they would be talking to that person about? Probably about stealing a mask, right? And so the fact that they say, hey, sit down, and he says no, tells us quite a bit of his intent already, because he knows why we're there. We asked, somebody told him to sit down, and he just said no, right? Now, I don't know, sorry, I haven't watched that video in a while, because I also don't like to watch it.
Yeah.
But I don't remember how many opportunities he had to sit down, but police presence is one opportunity to sit down. And if things like my kids' safety is really a concern to me, my first gut instinct is I better sit down. That's me. I have 4 kids. Although I've never been in a position like this with any of my kids, that would be a concern of mine, and I would sit down and I would stop. And so if the nose of the car is here and he's walking even anywhere past the nose of the car, I'm gonna assume he knows why my car is here, what I'm gonna do and what I'm asking for. If he's walking beyond that, he's not gonna stop for me. Or, you know, I've already given him the opportunity once verbally, but also presence. I think this person has an intention not to listen and to follow directions, just like when he left a store without purchasing something.
Sure. Yeah, thank you.
So I'm sorry. if that was-
Yeah.
Okay.
No, thanks.
Excellent.
That's why we bring you here.
I'll come next month.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, it'll be one of these rare instances that I'm respectfully feeling like I'm channeling Rick. This is like, he leans in. I'm gonna channel Rick and also talk about our discussion a few minutes ago, like, this is not our lane, like, this discussion about the use of force in this case, like, we don't know, we would need to be briefed and hear about it. Like, it happened in 1 second. To me, Jose, actually, the whole thing about the children is the fact that the grip on the stroller was so tight. In my mind, that's what the officer was there was a real risk that that in an upset, those kids were gonna get hurt. But I can't get away from, it's a theft 3. It's some stupid ski mask from a store. We always have to scratch our heads and ask ourselves, you know, why do we, you know, how do we get here, you know, but I can't give an opinion about that. You know, I'm not being asked to here. And it's a really tough one, you know, and then my agony about the video, actually, it's very difficult, but I can understand the additional use of force that Lindsay talked about, when seated and the spit hood and everything, all of that is troubling. But what's really troubling is a man whose kids are being separated from him, being taken, the cost to the city and to the state and DHS and everything, the partner, if there is a mother of those children, that's gonna get a call. You know, his life just went to the toilet over theft 3. And that's just really troubling, like, but this is about whether they should have turned their videos on. And I agree with what you said earlier, that we get an opportunity to look at a different side of it. It's just a tough one to get because it is loaded with this. I did have one quick question. Officer 3 or C, the plainclothes officer. I'm just curious, is there body worn video on when you're working plainclothes and in a vest like that?
Nope, that's a great question. And I mean, yeah, I think that person potentially should. I don't know exactly what these like, is it surveillance, is it work? And I know work is surveillance, but any opportunity that something like this pops up, it'd be great to have it. And I don't know exactly what surveillance that person was conducting. Sometimes it was a detective, property crimes detective. And so a theft 3 or something like that would spark his attention. I don't have an answer.
Well, no, yeah, to my point is that we have the independent videographer videoing scenes in which the officer I'm referring to is clearly involved, and yet we didn't, I don't know if it was just because it wasn't really relevant that we didn't see it, but it wasn't referenced that existed. And we had a presentation recently about the operation of the cameras and that, like, they've been purchased for SWAT, but we don't know SWAT's wearing them. It occurred to me, is that person, they wearing one or not?
I didn't.
Sure,
Yeah.
thank you.
I'm not sure either. Quick side note, I apologize, it's the wrong time, but I did check in with the chief about the whole cameras and SWAT issue, and they let me know, or he let me know, sorry, I'm on they. That's been subject to a demand to bargain. So we're working it out with the union.
Thank you.
And I will keep you updated and keep you posted.
I don't mean to be pedantic here. Is it appropriate for us to turn off the camera for a second and just review the first 5 seconds of this video? Can I do that?
To refresh memories.
For who's
We don't
benefit?
we don't have to see the takedown, I want to show the context for my.
I guess
for
we
my-
could go into executive session.
So that I don't have to,
It's specified, that's not one of
No,
the three
it's
reasons
something-
for
oh.
executive session, so,
Confidential.
Well, Jose, for whose benefit?
yeah.
I mean, I want to say that, some of the framing around the approach, I think is inaccurate.
Mhm.
And I think it's in our interest for,
You mean from the
You- for-
report to this?
yeah, for me to not editorialize that and for you to have an opportunity to, I don't know, maybe assess my comment next to it.
To me, it
I-
seems like it'd be more appropriate to bring it back at a
Exactly.
future meeting
Okay.
after a group watch.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because
We're on intake and assessment.
Right.
So the question is there something in the video that would have caused this to be a different intake and classification?
I think it's a de-escalation.
Okay, so,
Considered.
so
Yeah.
that's what you would have liked to have had, a de-escalation allegation considered.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand now.
So I see that appropriateness for,
Procedurally, is that okay?
returning to it.
Yeah.
Does that feel okay?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
That's-
I do
that's why I
also
asked
see the
instead of
value of
just-
doing it, it just seems awkward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I want to clarify I have a question for you.
Okay.
When you say that we should stay in our lane and not look at things, the way that maybe I'm misunderstanding you, but the way that I see this part of the discussion is that we do think about all of the allegations. And it's not up to us to like adjudicate whether or not it was a use of force, but it is up to us to say, like, why wasn't it alleged to be use of force or de-escalation?
So when Jose just said what he said, I totally understand your point and I agree with you, but I felt that as we were going around the table, we were deliberating that particular use of force, that we were opining about it as opposed to, should the auditor have
Okay.
considered more? And that is where I
Cool,
felt
yeah.
that, that it was slippery.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
I apologize for.
I'm prone to opining. That's a fair
I think
allegation.
we all are.
Evidently, opining.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a fair point, that I think it's both, right? Because, I mean, we're here so you can review my work and the work of IA, right? And it's not reviewing the officer's work, right? However,
At all.
saying, I mean, that ostensibly, that's what the code says, the charter says, it's to review my work and the work of IA, right? But part of that is, did I bring the right allegations? Did I classify it the right way? Did we investigate it fully? Was it adjudicated appropriately? All of that. And so I think it falls into a lot of looking at what the officer did and was that okay, right? Because ultimately you're gonna say whether this adjudication, whether you agree with it or not. But it is an interesting, very slippery slope to go down, to go like, well, but but again, I come back to, I like hearing more about what you all think I should have considered. And sort of testing it against my memory of what we did consider and what we did talk about. And someday I'm gonna remember to write those discussions down.
Well,
Right, and it also, oh, sorry.
I'm just gonna add, that's a helpful redirection
Mhm.
into, how I hope my comment was received, which was, I would have, preferred an additional form of classification.
Gotcha.
Thank you for that reframing.
No, I appreciate you.
And I think we all understand that we only see closed cases, and what we come up with in this discussion is not going to cause it to be reopened.
But it helps me a lot when I see the next one.
Exactly, that's why I bring this stuff up.
Not that
It's
this
like,
will ever happen.
but like,
No,
yeah,
I'm kidding.
but then, yeah, I know.
And for clarification, just for all of us, every use of force has 3 levels of review, right? At least 3.
I mean, so every use of force gets reviewed by the chain of command, it gets reviewed by defensive tactics, and it gets reviewed by us. Every single one. Right? Sorry, reportable use of force, thank you for the, yes, reportable use.
Of which this was.
Oh.
This was a reportable use of force.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah, that's for Lindsay.
thank you.
That's why we saw it.
Right,
Yeah.
that's what I thought, but I just wanted to bring the whole thing back to surface.
Thank you.
Okay, so where are we? Are we
Yeah.
on to?
No, yeah,
I
same,
think we're at
yeah.
Monique.
Monique,
really,
Monique
again,
hasn't
helpful.
given her position yet.
Right.
Yeah. Monique, please.
It's sometimes hard to hear like the stay in your lane thing because I just feel, and maybe this is like you know, maybe I need some correction and direction outside of this meeting. But I just feel like whatever I'm thinking when I'm reading this
I
should be
like hearing
said,
it. Yeah.
like that should like. And I do agree, like I recognize that it's not going to change the adjudication, likely not gonna change policy, but if I've sat here for 3 years and I say the same thing, maybe I'll be annoying and there will be a change eventually. And so I think,
It's my philosophy.
correct,
Yeah.
so if I just like to talk about whatever I'm seeing and like, I know there's, the Monday or whatever, Sunday night quarterback, whatever,
Monday morning.
that.
They play every day now.
Yeah, seriously, it'd be any day of the week.
I get you.
So,
That's second guessing.
yeah, that's like, I just want like. I just want to talk about whatever I'm seeing that I'm not, like, that I like and don't like, it's not always like. That. And I do, like, I feel like the stay in your lane thing might apply more to like the auditor, just because what you do is so official, but I'm just talking and making comments, so like, I don't get that. But I don't have any classification recommendations, just because it's clear that, use of force was considered. And I actually think, like, I can just feel what was going on in that situation. He was being like passively resistant, filibustering almost, like just, but active, at the same time, actively resistant, because he was told to sit down and he said no, even though he said it calmly. He didn't yell no, but he still said no. And so I think that it's appropriate to, at that point, physically get what you were requesting. Because it was reasonable, like he wasn't asking for too much. I also thought it was interesting when you had mentioned that, like, as like an additional context, that the suspect could have been using their child's crutch, and that could have like been what they were trying to do in that interaction by the officer quickly putting an end to that. That was no longer able to happen. With regard to the body camera footage, I think that was appropriate classified. We wanted to have seen this situation. So, yeah.
Thank you. Intake, classification, and the third thing is monitoring. I think, all seemed appropriate to me in terms of classification and development of allegations. As reviewing it, I think you have to judge it by the laws that are on the books and the policies that are on the books, and I think that was done appropriately. And we can have a conversation about whether uses of force are appropriate in those situations, but that is, I mean, from my experience, it's a pretty low level use of force, and it was allowed. So, I mean, that's what I'm trying to wrestle with. It's like, in the system that we are in, was that, I think the allegations were appropriate and the classification is appropriate. And do we want to talk as a society about larger issues and how we support people so they don't have to steal a face mask, and so that they don't have drug use as a part of their children's lives, and then so that police don't have to get involved? Yes, we can do that, but in the context that we're in, I think the allegations available to you were the ones that you chose were the appropriate ones. I will only say one thing, Monique. What I worry about is something that is like a cultural thing that came out in this case, of sort of feeling like the system is not, and actually, as you said too, Leah, that the process is the punishment, and if we are a part of that, like, what is our role in being productive and collaborative as a group, even though we're volunteers? But what did we sign up for to be part of CRB, and how can we make the best impact? And how I think about that is not just saying my personal feelings, which I have a lot of, but trying to bring that professional, like, understanding of what my role is here and how I can contribute. And sometimes that should be like raising the question, like, we are doing about things that are maybe outside of the traditional boundaries of what we're saying. And sometimes It is, trying to understand the context that we're operating. So I don't disagree with what you said. I just would layer on that role that we have and the responsibility we have.
Thank you, Clay.
Didn't I start?
You did.
I think Rick started.
No,
Rick started.
you didn't.
Oh. Yeah, no, I think the intake was fine. I mean, obviously, I always appreciate that there are these internal checks that bring these things up to be able to be reviewed. I think that the stay in your lane comment is more with regards to not having a discussion to adjudicate something that's not before us. So I think it's appropriate for us to say there maybe should have been other things considered, which I think some of them were and were dismissed. And so I appreciate the classification and the reasons for this being brought to us. That's it.
Our next round of discussion is adjudication recommendation.
No, thank
EPD policies, training.
practices, and training.
Thank you. And starting us off is Carolyn.
Yeah, I think, I don't know what more training could be involved in making sure that the officers double tap their camera when they get out of the car.
I think that's exactly it.
I mean, just remind them that it doesn't automatically happen if they don't turn their lights on, but it seems like they know that. And then, the only thing would be the plainclothes officer, and if that's a policy that they have a camera. So that would be the only question that I would have and suggestion that I would put forth in terms of training and policy. Because it seems like we have the cameras available. I'm done.
And I thought about it a little bit since you brought it up. When I was a detective for a time as well, and in my car, I had my my vest, right?
Mhm.
That I'd be able to put on and take off if need be. I did not always have my camera, and that's because sometimes I'd be on surveillance several hours and the camera could die.
Mhm.
And that sometimes I drive home and I don't have docking stations. We don't have docking stations at home, so I can't take it home with me because if in the morning or late at night I have to go somewhere, it's gonna be dead.
Right, so maybe just some clarity on the policy for that
Sure.
sort of role.
Yeah, and so I don't know, yeah, and that's something that for us to learn is, what was the meaning for him to be out and
Mhm.
in his rig with his stuff, is he going to or from work? Because if so, then yeah, he probably didn't have his camera on. Is it something different? Like, was he going out for something? Then maybe, yeah, we should think about
Right.
having that because that is part of that uniform of the day, so.
And I assume that's why there wasn't an allegation on that officer as well, because of something like that.
I think so too.
Because what?
Okay, so the issue is, and now we have another additional angle as to how there was a failure to activate body worn footage. And I think you don't have to do a lot of close reading to get that this wasn't a malevolent non-activation of body worn video. That's not a stretch.
Right.
But not malevolent is also not good enough. And I think as we were discussing this in case selection, and please correct me if I'm misremembering, Carolyn, that this is there was a moment that we were talking about in the interview where I think Officer A was saying that they rely on the sirens activating as activating their body worn video. And when I read that, I'm like, oh, there's a habit that's going on there,
Mhm.
and that it's human nature for us to get stuck in habits. And how I think in terms of policy or training or procedures, it's how do we get EPD to develop these habits where turning on body worn video is as second nature as putting on a uniform. And I don't think it's malevolent. I think that there's just, how do we locate where this maybe failure is the wrong word to say.
Habit.
How do we cultivate the habits that we want to see that are good for the people of Eugene? And also, I think talking about money is good. Yeah. Like probably developing these habits is good business too. Yeah, that's my comment.
Okay, and not to go back, but I'm gonna just go back a second because I want to address the, because I'm not usually a stay in your lane. I'm very supportive of your point about speaking your mind, and I'm also supportive of Clay's point of layering on that with remembering, mindful of what we're doing. And I just want to throw in there that I have a history of working for a long time with the police in different, as a prosecutor, as a public defender, as a judge, like, and I've learned over the years, like, they deserve, they get judged so much that they deserve to be judged like when they're supposed to be judged on their conduct, and they deserve to like have a kind of respect of, you know, we're not being asked to adjudicate, as Bernadette said, whether this was a good takedown or not. But I totally was persuaded by Jose that it is with all of you, that it's within the purview of us to say, I wish you had charged use of, you know, not de-escalating or whatever. But I just think that there's a level of just being, and I sit here on eggshells always, really, really careful, trying to be, even though I end up spewing, I try to be careful about what I say, because it's just, you know, because it's hard, you know. And at last meeting, Deputy Chief Adams actually it was at the selection of the next members of the CRB meeting, where there was a little, like, you know, where someone was a little unfair to the police, and you could see that it was, so I was just so, but it wasn't an admonishment. I just wanted to say it was simply like my reacting to thinking that we're going past where we're supposed to go. That's way too much about it. On this, I think the answer, Sergeant Tinseth, whatever his rank is, I don't want to insult him, Lieutenant Tinseth, who gave us the presentation about the cameras, like, I was persuaded right then and there that this is a technological issue where the fix is not going to be training and habit. It's going to be that it's going to be a policy where it's always on. Forget about the muting for tactical discussions. You can always eliminate, delete that. But if there's take the brain and the decision out of it and make it so that we have body worn video for. This was, as you pointed out, a use of force where without the videographer, we would not have been able to see what happened. So that, to me, that's the solution.
And when we were talking during case selection, I'm sorry, it's not my turn.
No.
You're the chair, you can do what you want.
Listen up. Sorry. That was my suggestion. Like, let's just take all the human error out of it. And I think it was Leah that reminded us that we don't want to necessarily have to review officers maybe going to the bathroom or, you know, there might be sexual assault
But you
victims who
can
would
press
be
it, you
on
can
this.
still mute it, you can still do it, but if it was always on, like, instead of having to activate, instead of, you have to remember to deactivate. And yes, you might catch
There
some,
would be, yeah,
you might catch
different
some bathroom things, but you probably would learn to turn it off when you went to the bathroom.
But I'm
Yeah.
also willing to read through that in order to get it on.
Yeah,
as-
yeah.
If we're just concerned about ourselves.
Monique.
might have had an experience like that at a murder trial.
Yeah, and no, I'm sure it can.
Sorry, yes.
I don't have any training recommendations. I think like training might, I don't know what kind of training they could do other than having them press it a whole bunch of times.
Rote memorization.
And go.
The little sign.
Well, actually, that is a good one. But like maybe, yeah, that's a good one. Or like some kind of sound, or like said, turn me on.
Classical conditioning works.
Yeah.
I mean,
Any parent will tell you.
The policy is good. I think the fact that it says shall makes it so that it's super clear, makes this process super easy.
Yeah, oh, sorry, you finished.
Mhm.
I agree, like, you know, I forgot my keys this morning. Like, I don't ever forget my keys. It's a natural thing that I should take with me. I have to get into my office. Like, so. I
Did you
forgot
really
that.
forget your keys, or is that just?
No, I
like an
forgot, I
example?
literally forgot my
Wow,
keys.
good timing.
And I think that there are times when that can happen for a variety of circumstances, whether it's stress induced or speed of the interaction, and you know, it is a policy that we have on the books, and we went through a process, and it's unfortunate that the officer, at least one of the officers, felt like that process was a punishment. It's just like you have to have some sort of conversation about a policy being a policy. And I don't know that there's additional training. I don't think those officers need additional training for it. It's, you know, maybe one was a malfunction and the other was just a situational thing, and it happens. And it's unfortunate. And luckily we have video that helps describe the event. Also, otherwise, so that's all. It's good.
I have nothing to add.
I have nothing on training or any of that other.
Can I add one more thing? I did like how the officers interacted with the children afterwards. I thought that was something that they
They took
should,
a lot of care.
yeah. We always talk about the bad stuff, but we should also.
That's good. Yeah, there was some.
Okay, we are on adjudication. I think I'm aligned with the auditor's office, that there's insufficient evidence for these allegations. And I've done this before where I make a begrudging agreements where noticing that there are some there's some hair splitting stuff, and this might not be the place or the time for it, but I thought that, yeah, generally agree. And I do like to see discrepancies in the chain of command. And there was discrepancy between, I think, the lieutenant and
DC Adams and the chief,
there we go.
and DC Adams and everybody else.
Yeah,
Yep.
so,
Well, and somebody thought it was within
Oh,
policy.
someone, yeah.
There was all the
Chain of
things.
command.
yeah, there was a spectrum of reactions, and I think that is some indication of the importance and integrity of the process.
Seems like we're seeing a lot of chain of command seems to sustain now. I mean, seems to go with that it's within policy a lot. Shout out to DC Adams for, you know, I just think there's a policy, it's a shall, it wasn't used. I don't quite understand the reasoning, but I'm not really heavily invested. I think it is, in fact, the discussion was the event for the remaining officers. So that's it. Thank you.
We're in a new category?
Yeah, well, it's adjudication recommendation.
Yeah, so was the auditor and the chief at the same?
Insufficient evidence.
Yeah, okay, so I agree with both.
Maybe we need to go to that definition, because I understood what was in the letter, and I don't think I read the policy on what the difference between insufficient evidence and
So-
sustained is.
I can,
Sustained is the complainant allegation was determined to be a violation of EPD policies, rules, or procedures. The employee involved committed the violations as alleged. Insufficient evidence is the chain of command was unable to determine whether or not a violation of EPD policies, rules, or practices occurred. Unfounded, which was, I think, the other chain of command said. Oh, within policy. Okay, so then there's unfounded. The claim is unsubstantiated. It is determined that the employee involved did not engage in the behavior as alleged by the complainant. And then within policy it was determined that the behavior of the employee involved did occur, but was consistent with EPD policies, rules, practices.
Yeah, so I guess I'm inclined to think from the knowledge that I have, which is not as extensive as any of you, but that it would be sustained, and that there would be an appropriate, like a low level appropriate like outcome from that,
yeah,
instead of insufficient evidence, which doesn't seem correct.
right.
But I know that you thought about that, so I wonder if
I can.
we could go through and then you could talk about it, or.
Are we voting now or just speaking now?
We're just speaking now.
Okay, I take my vote back.
No,
Not that I'm voting differently.
I don't wanna jump in, Bernadette.
I really disagree with the person that said it was within policy.
Yeah.
I have real concerns that someone said this was within policy. And I hope that someone higher in the chain of command is having a discussion with them about what within policy really means.
Yeah.
So that's my discussion at this point.
Thank you. Rick?
Unaccustomed as I am to disagreeing with Bernadette, I disagree with him. I agree with the sergeant who said that it was within policy, because the distinguishing factor between within policy and insufficient evidence is insufficient evidence would be that if you didn't have proof that the person violated the policy. It's pretty clear that the person didn't turn on the camera, which is the predicate of the policy provision being violated. If it's going to be a decision on the part of the police department that what was happened at that time was not within the policy that they want to promote, such as in situations where you don't remember, or it's a human error, or something else goes wrong that causes you not to turn on the camera, that falls within policy. So I think we're talking about semantics here, but I thought about it for a while, and it struck me that there is evidence that the policy was violated, and that's gets you by insufficient evidence. The issue is a judgment call with respect to whether or not that violates the policy. And the question about whether it violates the policy is a judgment of whether or not the people in charge of this department want to call that a violation of the policy, or a violation of principles that they want to impart to their employees. So that's what I feel about it.
I think that it was interesting, but Officer A, they said that they often don't turn on their camera. And they kind of seem to be using that as like an excuse for, it's okay that or it's weird that you're catching me this time when I do it all the time. I thought that was interesting, but I think, so to me, I had the same thought that like, did they turn on the camera? No, that is a violation of the policy. But I think the way that I think Lindsay wrote it in the adjudication was, there is no evidence that there is lack of body worn camera activation was intentional, coordinated, or done in an effort to omit facts. Though their camera was not activated in a situation as required by policy, it appears to be an innocent and understandable human error rather than misconduct. Therefore, I recommend this allegation be adjudicated as insufficient evidence. I was like on board to be like, no, policy violated, until I read that. And then I was like, yeah, I mean, they are humans. Like I can give them that grace, I suppose. But if we're really going to go to like black and white, yes, they violated the policy.
It's like a strict liability thing.
Well,
In the law, it's like, is it just per se, if you didn't do it, you're guilty? Or is there a mental component, a mens rea component? And that's what this discussion is, you know? And the department decided on the side of, that there is it's not strict liability, that there is a moment of where a mistake, or, you know, and Rick, I think that's a very interesting analysis. I appreciated it. So thank you for that.
Appropriate for me to jump
Yeah.
in? or-
Yes, please.
Sorry, I just
Yeah,
have-
no, good.
Okay, so I think, have you gone?
I haven't gone, but
Okay.
go for it.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. I think I started this part off.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
all right, okay, sorry. Okay, so yes, exactly. I think the mental state requirement is something that had come up before. And it's what, like, it actually has come up with like untruthfulness and like the big time allegations, right? Because it's, in practice, it's theoretically, right, there could be a reckless or an accidental omission of material fact, right? And that would violate the truthfulness policy, but because it has such huge implications, right? We don't tend to sustain it if it appears to not be a willful, right, violation. And so in this one, it was tough because it was the same kind of thing. And I remember there was one time, sorry, I'm talking about Mark a few times this meeting, but I remember one time he just threw out not sustained. And I was like, that's not in the list. We can't do that. But I get it because in this one, it's like, yes, black and white, there should have been video. There wasn't video. Our concern like, the thing that we had to ask about is, well, was there any kind of intent, right? Not that I really thought that that's what happened, but that's the question I have to ask is, did you plan to use force on this person after you like intentionally didn't turn on your camera? Like, that's what community could be worried about, right? That's what I
Mhm.
asked. So when we knew there wasn't that like level of intent, then what do we do? And so, I mean, I think insufficient evidence was where we landed with all of those things. But yes, black and white, yes, this was a violation of policy. I mean, I hear what you're saying, Rick, that if we're saying that there's like a mental, if we're basically saying that, I hear what you're saying, Rick. I don't know how to rephrase it, but anyway, I don't know. It was one of those things where it was tough. And I remember when we were talking about it, I was like, now I remember the not sustained. I get it. Because it's just like, well, I mean, there should have been a recording, and I don't think it was there, you know, this wasn't willful, it was an accident, these things happen. I don't want to be that mean.
So
Yeah,
if I may ask,
Mhm.
we are not our criteria are not beholden to like strictly legal definitions per se, right? Like, you don't have to find the mens rea for this to be.
There's no mental state requirement for policy.
Right. So the legal standard would be kind of above and beyond what's required here in terms of criteria.
So, I mean, I think we're just kind of talking past each other a little bit. The standard, the burden of proof for an administrative investigation is more likely than not, it's 51%, right?
Yeah.
Was there 51% of the evidence that established the policy was violated?
But you wouldn't have to necessarily prove intent in order to get a sustained.
No,
Okay. I think that like there's
not by the letter.
I understand I understand the practical kind of thinking here
Mhm.
and the taking into, I think it's okay to feel uncomfortable about like the stakes of consequences and how this affects people's workplace
Mhm.
without kind of getting afraid about, well, are we gonna apply it this way in this case or this way in that
Sure.
case? So that was my question. It
Yeah.
wasn't trying to like undermine you,
No,
but
that's okay.
to place it in a larger context of the totality of circumstances.
Plus, I got really excited about the not sustained there, so yeah, thanks for bringing it down.
It's gray area that is essentially kind of is our charge to wade through.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, you need to drone on. Alan, would you please start us off for closing comments?
I just want to thank everybody.
Wait, do we vote?
Oh, you want
Did
to
we-
vote?
Do we agree?
This is entirely up to you if you want to. vote or not.
I mean, if you
I mean,
just
I
did
think
it for the
we kind of
records,
understood it.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can have it in the minutes and,
I should
Why
have
not?
one last thing.
sure.
I still believe that it's insufficient evidence for the things that were being said, that it clearly wasn't intentional. Whether or not intent is required, but I do think like it's helpful, and I don't think it would have made sense to say it's within policy. And, you know, black and white was against policy, but like this was an out, and I've seen it used like that before, so I didn't have a problem with that, just because this wasn't so egregious. But we do want to
Mhm.
be seeing every single case.
Every red light conviction that I have presided over in my entire career of 15 or 16 years as a municipal judge, like, it was never intentional that you were in the intersection after the light. I mean, really, like, there are certain things where intent would no one would ever get convicted because everyone always says, you know, I mean, it's but there are certain things like, was the light red when you entered the intersection? Or did you turn your camera on? Yes or no? You know, so I just think that,
Did you buckle your seatbelt?
Mm.
You either buckled.
I forgot, you have people always have reasons, I was distracted, you know, but it's a default line and it's kind of, you know, it gets tired even hearing it yourself about, you know, it's not judging you, it's not about whether are usually do it or don't, it's like on this day, at this time, in this place, you didn't do X, you know, so that's kind of, but I'm not trying to convince you, it sounds like I am.
I think, well,
I'm not, okay?
Yes, please.
So I think one of the difficulties in this part that we're talking about right now is actually in that we had to deal with it as an allegation of misconduct, right? Because we end up with these, like, we have to put it in one of these categories. Whereas if we had like, for example, if there had been like in the report, like, this is why I didn't try, I recognize I didn't turn it on, this is why I didn't turn it on, blah, 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 right? Like, if we'd had all that in the report, there, it's possible, right? We could have dealt with it as a service complaint at that point. It would have gone to the employee supervisor, the supervisor would have been like, you guys, why didn't you turn this on? You're supposed to turn it on, the auditor's cranky, like, blah, blah, blah. And that would have, it would have just been a coaching and it would have been handled, right? And so I think that's, obviously, that's not as truthfulness is always gonna be up here, but I think it's interesting to hear this discussion around that, because I do think that that's kind of part of it, is like, because this is the avenue that we were, the only avenue really that we had to ask those questions, that like, this is what, now we're getting mixed up. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, that makes sense.
With that being said, I had an idea of a training training,
For us or
no, for them,
Okay.
consideration for them is maybe, I wonder how often the supervisors are bringing that up when they're looking at
The
the,
vibe.
at like the
Yeah.
reports of the evening and saying,
Mhm.
you didn't have your camera, like,
Yeah,
like
Well,
it
yeah.
could be more training toward the people who are overseeing the people who are not turning their cameras
I
on.
think that's fair. Well, and I mean, we definitely, like, it's come up, like, because officers in their use of force, like, they write their own use of force reports. And so
Mhm.
that's sort of where it typically comes up is, well, if you'd only written more detail about why you chose to do blah, blah, blah. So anyway, sorry, that's it. Yeah.
Great.
Sergeant Jensen could talk to that. When you see something like that, when you approve a report,
Sure, I would be concerned and I would have that conversation with the officer. And that's maybe not something that every sergeant is considering, right? And so I do think that that's something that could be addressed. I don't. One of the first places we go, when getting something like this is to say, hey, what was your conversation like? Because I agree. In fact, we've had other people that, I mean, I've shared this with you guys while we were talking about it. I was like, yeah, I was on a scene for a pretty substantial car crash and I looked down and I was like, I don't have my body camera. And I was a brand new sergeant and one of the officers looks at me, he's like, I'm sorry, Sarge, what did you say? And I was like, I don't have my body camera. I gotta go back to HQ. And I left and I went back. I didn't do anything on the scene, but I wrote up and said, I failed to use my body camera when I was on the scene.
Mhm.
Nobody has any questions.
So is it reasonable that one of the officers said in this process that I rarely remember to turn my camera on and would never have been coached about it?
That has never been trained. We've never been taught to expect other people's response to activate our body cameras.
Okay. So it is reasonable that they said, there's lots of times I haven't turned my camera on and this is the one time that you're gonna bring it up. I can't remember.
So I would look at it something similar to, am I opening a can of worms?
No, you don't have to.
You guys are safe. I appreciate you. I don't know for a fact, but I believe there are some people, when I first started my police career, which there were officers that were dead set that they don't wear their seatbelt because they have to be ready to go at any time. And it is definitely within our policy to wear our seatbelt. And I don't know if there's officers that still do that, but I could see officers still making an argument that I have to be ready at all times, right? And so do I investigate everyone that's ever been said to not have a seatbelt on? I don't have an answer for that. It's, you know, is that helpful? Is that-
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
and I felt like the context there was like, because there are fail safes for this thing turning on, I get why you don't have that, like, oh, I didn't turn on my lights. I do get it. I just need it.
Yeah, like if you have a toilet that always automatically flushes
Right.
and then you go to a toilet that doesn't,
Yeah.
you forget to do it.
It's like sinks. Sorry.
It's
Yeah.
fine.
It's fine.
It's fine. Put that in the minutes.
Closing comments. Alan,
I think I'm done with my.
About the case.
About the meeting.
About
With the case, right?
about the closing comments is about the case.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure.
No, I really appreciate the distinction of how it could have been a service. Why it elevated to an allegation as opposed to, and that this often could be dealt with, not in the context of a more formal discipline. Thing, because it's a violation, if there's no intent to like, there was a videographer in this case that was taking high quality, high def video, so there could clearly be no attempt to avoid scrutiny. But think about, there would be no record without that. And so, I think in cases, I don't think there should be an inhibition, a fear of the stigma of discipline for the violation of not turning your camera on, and that each one should be separately evaluated. And if there is evidence that it's to elude scrutiny, obviously that should escalate. And if it's a mistake or inadvertent, it's a little ding on, it's not going to keep anyone, it shouldn't prevent raises or promotions or things. It should just be noted as opposed to a pass. Thank you.
I agree that this case, well, and not every violation is the end of the world. Some of them, though, are a bit concerning, but this just wasn't that serious. The case was disappointing, but the allegation, unfortunate.
Yeah, I think, I'm sort of just in agreement with what Ellen said, that I think the discussion about it more camera on, and if you don't, just like, it's luckily in this case, not a huge deal, but it should be noted somehow. I wish there were more processes that could be at different stages of seriousness, that we kind of talked about last meeting also.
Yeah.
So, and I understand why that wasn't an opportunity this time, so that's all.
I have nothing to add.
No comments.
I have said enough.
Sure.
Mhm.
I just want to thank Leah, Robin, and Lindsay for suggesting this case, because again, it brings a more nuance. I think the more nuance that we have about this discussion, the more we can have an ongoing understanding about maybe that there is a necessary amount of human error that has to go into body worn footage, given that this is the best technology that we have available at this time right now. Maybe we'll have an AI algorithm in 5 to 10 years that will sort through all of the accidental body footage for an always on camera or body worn video or something like that. We don't have that right now, so thank you. We have, yeah, thank you for being our general intelligence.
Yeah. I'm great.
I think I'm bringing in public comment. We have time for public comment. Do we have any?
No, so we have Vicky, but no, there's no members of the public.
We also have liaison elections.
So did we skip 7, 8?
Oh my gosh.
Jose's ready to go home.
So you were
done.
doing,
It's a time change, man.
Yeah.
we did the auditor's report as part of your training? Is that what we
Yeah,
did?
there's nothing to add. I talked a lot. Sorry, Claire.
We need to do some liaison elections for human rights and police commission. We deferred that, didn't we?
We did.
Yeah, because Monique almost got voluntold when you weren't here. You were gonna be our human rights. Sorry.
Well, do you not want to do it anymore?
Well, what I will say about human rights is that it's been kind of chaotic, and I think Jose had this experience previously where it hasn't been a consistent sort of engagement. So thank you, Lindsay, for all the work that you've done to try to make that happen. So I have no perspective on whether I should be on human rights anymore or not. But I believe in the mission and the values of it, and I would, if you're interested, I would encourage you to participate
Okay.
as a representative if you want to, because it's good experience.
I would
I
love to
wanted-
nominate Monique to be our liaison to the Human Rights Commission.
I wanted to nominate Monique to be the liaison for the police commission. So I don't know if that would
Well,
change
Second.
the.
I would love to.
Oh,
Which one?
Which one?
There's 2.
Hold on, okay, hold on. I think on the police commission, I think we should have some discussion too. Because I think we currently have a liaison.
Right, but you didn't,
Yeah, but
He's willing to serve through his
through
time.
June.
sure, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And also because with police commission, we have to have sort of ratification by the city council might be better to do that on a different timeline.
Meaning do it now to get the position appointed
No,
by June.
because they'll be doing appointments to commissions in June. So if we do it now, it's not gonna take forever.
So it doesn't matter to do it now because they're not going to ratify it until June. Okay.
What my recommendation would be to stick with our current awesome, lovely commission liaison. And then in June, have that discussion,
Got it. I see what you're saying.
so they can be seated on the next round of POCO. Police commission.
Okay, but I still feel like
At that time,
that if
You're gonna
we,
make Monique do all? of
if,
the
well, no, I
commissions?
don't think that we should make her do that.
Oh, okay, sorry.
But if, it's worth bringing up, because
Yes,
if
no, it
she's
is.
willing to do it and we would vote for her to do it,
Mhm.
then I don't want her to be on the Human Rights
Wait,
Commission.
Rick, which one were you seconding?
Monique being placed on the commission,
Which one?
going, being a liaison, whatever she wanted, I don't really care.
That should be.
I was seconding Bernadette's motion.
Okay, that's perfect.
I should try and get back in her good graces.
First.
I just think that what you said makes sense, like
Okay.
waiting until June. I am also concerned if this is a year-long position that I'm not gonna be available in June.
Gotcha, okay. Okay,
Of 2025. Or you wouldn't be available this June.
Oh, is it is it 25
no,
June?
you're good.
Oh,
So you would start June of 24 until June of 25.
Or
Okay,
you do the human
so
rights
to
commission
clarify-
now until
Yeah.
whenever we
Human
decide we
rights,
can do
you
it.
could start now.
mhm.
Police commission would be, well, and also, we could also do a selection to be human rights liaison until June and then do all of this all over again in June.
also because we'll have new members too, right?
We won't have new members until July,
Oh, July.
but we also don't tend to throw new members at.
Commissions, that's true.
Unless it's somebody coming back
And
from the
can,
board.
just as a point of clarification, we're using the word liaison,
Yes,
but I learned we should be precise. So
yeah.
for the Human Rights Commission, it's an informational liaison. It's a role that's traditionally been established between the people of these two bodies to help share information and communication on topics that are of mutual interest.
Mhm.
You don't have a voting seat and you're not appointed officially to that. So you sit in the audience, you listen, you observe, you can make public comment, just like anybody else can make public comment to help share information. There have been points in the past where there's also like a reverse liaison from that group to this group. And so that there was kind of mutual two-way communication and engagement. That it's been a while since that has existed, but
Mhm.
this still exists. Whereas police commission is like a true liaison, you're appointed by council to serve as a voting member in a dual role. So they are a little bit different. And so there's kind of, with the Human Rights Commission, it's a little bit more flexible because really you're just saying, as a gesture of goodwill from this body to that body, I will go and listen and be a conduit. Whereas the other one is a little more formal. If that is helpful and
Yeah.
so you make your.
And for example of that, Lindsay sent me, got me access to video recordings of previous meetings of the Human Rights Commission, and I will review those at our next meeting. We'll just report what I have learned from watching these videos, and it's not so important that I would have been there to vote on things previously.
I think like we've talked about before, it would be interesting to start out at the Human Rights Commission and like work my way up because it's less formal.
Okay.
And then we'll talk about other things in the.
So my motion's on the floor.
Yes, motion.
And seconded, it sounded like Rick seconded it.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Okay,
Oh, wait.
Aye.
You can vote for yourself.
Yeah.
Aye.
okay.
It's unanimous.
Congratulations.
And we are
Yay.
tabling police until June.
June.
Yeah, May, to make sure we have the person nominated for.
Yeah, I will check
vote.
on council appointment dates and get all that.
Yeah.
figured out. We will,
We don't want to miss their deadline.
they will remind me to check on council.
In my opinion, it wouldn't be bad if Alan and the incoming police commission, whatever, went to them. Like, it wouldn't be bad to have some overlap of like Alan.
No, I think it would be great to have some kind of, we'll talk.
Well, Ellen might be on that commission.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, otherwise I'm just watching you guys on the TV, so.
Otherwise,
That's a great Tuesday.
now.
And Thursday.
We got some Recap.
Okay,
All right. We're,
So Lindsay will help Monique
yeah.
get going with that.
all right. No. Is there any, we are adjourning at 7:45.
But now, see, I thought the closing comments were with regards to the case.
Now we have to offer more.
General.
Excuse me.
So no, that's okay. I was just confused when we were, because we hadn't done the liaison. So I just wanted to make.
Trying to get out early.
I am keeping us on time.
So I just,
You are.
I know that I mentioned last month, there were 2 closed cases, that obviously we didn't do this month. And so I think that those would still be a couple that I'd like to look at, but then I'm like looking at, something that was received on April 12th, 2023, a February closed case that has 8 allegations.
Hold on, let me catch you up.
No, it's the
Here,
one that Alan suggested
That's,
earlier.
yeah.
That's
that's
the
the
one I'm gonna be asking.
I'm looking at the document right now. Which one?
This
Oh,
one.
you can, that's the one. that
April
that's
12th, yeah.
The one that we were talking about earlier. Right, yeah. So I mean, obviously that is, it looks like it's gonna be a big case file.
Yeah.
So we can make
That,
some-
that I think is already on the docket for April. We
Yeah. They agree on that.
pending some
This is
clarification
what we
that
talked
Leah is
about.
going to find, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So just to be clear, Bernadette, you're saying that you would say the one that has the 8 allegations sort of has moved to the front of your line and.
No, I would say put that one on May because I'm not gonna be at the May one.
Oh, you
I
don't,
would have to do all the work. I'm just kidding. No. I'm still interested in those other 2, but obviously seeing this one having the number of allegations, it looks like it's probably more pressing than those other 2 that I had. But I thought those other 2 still keep them in the hopper.
Great.
So that's my closing.
Rick,
I'm good. Thank you.
good to know.
I said a lot after I said I was done talking, but now I really am done talking.
Okay. Thank you for your ongoing patience with my entrance into this chair role. Alan?
Thank you, EPD, for being here, and auditor and staff for being here, and thank you all for putting up with moi. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Grateful to be placed on the Human Rights Commission. And I look forward to learning about that role and the work that they do. So that'll be fun.
Grateful to have you step into that role. It actually conflicts with the neighborhood board that I'm on, so it's helpful to not have to miss both meetings. Yeah, no, I think it's nice to just, like you sort of mentioned, be able to have conversations about these important community issues from a variety of perspectives. So it's a good forum for that. And while our scope of work is limited, I think the robust conversations that we have are really interesting and for me helpful too in how we think about policing in communities. I appreciate that.
Did we start with you for closing comments for today?
Yeah, I
We
just
did.
jumped in there and started my closing.
Okay.
But thank you.
Adjourned.
Yeah.